Hello everyone and welcome to Pisa Presents. Today we're going to be looking at fossil sharks and their teeth. So before we discover just how much of a bigger boat we need, this is first of all dedicated to a late friend of mine, John. The nation had the honor of his service in World War II. He was a veteran on the USS Indianapolis. So John was very well dedicated to sharks, and despite what happened to him, he absolutely adored them and was very much devoted to shark awareness towards the end of his life, which happened only a few years ago. So farewell and adieu, buddy. Here we go. Now, sharks are indeed fish. They're cartilaginous fish, so no bony skeletons here. Now, they're from the class Chondrichthyes and the subclass Elasmobranchii. Here is a little chart on some famous shark species and how they relatively compare to themselves in size. Yes, the very big one up top is the megalodon. We'll get into that eventually. The largest extant or living shark right now is the whale shark, which is actually not that much smaller than the meg relatively. And then you're looking at a couple more here. Like you can see, my personal favorite is the hammerhead. I just think they're adorable. And there's a couple other ones here as well. Now, sharks can range from just really across the gamut in terms of size. So you're looking at the extant species dwarf lantern shark, which is 6.7 inches long, to, of course, the infamous meg, which is roughly maybe 60 feet long. We're not really quite sure about that one because all we've really found are the jaws and the teeth. It's a matter of kind of extrapolating based off of extant shark species just how big the meg was. So really, we don't even know how big that sucker was. Now, unlike humans, sharks often have rows of teeth set in a line. So in other words, tooth and back of tooth and back of tooth. Now, a shark can go through thousands of teeth in its lifetime, many, many thousands, 10,000, upwards of 40 or even more for some larger species. Now, this is partially why so many shark fossils are teeth, and it's also because of their cartilaginous skeletons. So cartilage doesn't really fossilize. It's not bone. There isn't really the strength and tenacity that they have there to survive the fossilization process. So because of that, and because they're really constantly just shedding teeth, that's why so many fossils of sharks are, well, their teeth. Now, most sharks are saltwater, like my friend right here, the hammerhead. You know, he's just testing the waters right there. Now, that species is the tawny nurse shark. They're one of sadly 25% of shark species living today that are actually threatened or pretty much worse. Now, the origins of such living sharks is nonetheless, to quote Encyclopedia Britannica, obscure, which is when an encyclopedia says that, so that's never a good thing. It's people really debate on when sharks came about and how various species are related to each other. Like some of the ones that we're going to be looking at very shortly. Some places I've seen classify them as sharks, some don't. It's a lot of back and forth with paleontology. Scientists can't even really agree when sharks arose. I've seen things everywhere from the Cambrian to the Devonian, with some sources calling the golden age of sharks actually the Carboniferous period, and a lot of modern sharks having their origins in the Jurassic. Now, denticles are basically dermal scales, they're also called. It's if you've ever felt a shark's skin, if you feel it one way, it's relatively smooth but kind of lumpy. If you put it on the other way, it feels like sandpaper. Right there, you're feeling the dermal denticles, those little wee almost scales coming up. So now, why are denticles the earliest evidence of sharks and not teeth? Well, that's because jawed fish only arose in about somewheres in between the Ordovician to the Silurian, which is really kind of if you look a little bit to the left of the that's when you get into the Ordovician. So like 450, 400 million years ago, they simply didn't have fish with jaws at the time. So if they didn't have jaws, then how could they have teeth? Now, this is our dear friend, the conodont. It's a very early jawless fish. Now, this here is giving us a little bit of an instruction. It's in the Devonian that many shark fossils begin to appear. So let's look at some of these early sharks and a couple of their new friends as well. So, first of all, a note on fossil hunting and shark teeth and everything else. Now, this photo right here is from the absolutely stunningly beautiful Calvert Cliffs in Maryland. It's an honor and a wonder to go to, and I very highly recommend it for everyone. Now, the thing is, and I've had this happen in a lot of places, like to give you an example, I was in the New Jersey in Monmouth County in the fossil creeks that are over there. And I found a tooth that it took me about 2 years to identify. Now, this happened a long time ago, and in part because what I thought it was kind of threw me. Now, you have to keep in mind that these specimens, these fossils, are coming from the water. So, what this species may really be may not really be endemic to your local area. It may not be a native, in other words. This tooth that I found when I was a kid that really threw me, it actually turned out to be from a species of Pleistocene camel that wasn't even anywhere near in that area. It just somehow got transported through the water, as you know, water does. So don't be surprised when you go fossil hunting and you find something that's just maybe a wee bit out of the ordinary. So, some do's and don'ts of shark teeth. Do not dig in the walls of the stream bed. That actually disturbs the stream bed and it's bad for the ecosystem. Just like on the same note, take out your trash and don't disturb any rocks or the environment itself. I know rock stacking and rock painting is very popular, and anybody that does that, all the power to you, but please don't do that with rocks from a native environment. Now, don't use a large sieve, and also do not use a shovel. Use smaller tools. Things say no bigger than 18-inch for the sieve. I'll show you a picture of the one that I actually use shortly. I got it from Amazon. And yes, if you go to places like the aforementioned Fossil Creeks in Monmouth County, there have been times that my husband and I have been there when local officials come by and be sure that people are following the rules. So I don't want you guys to get kicked out any place, and I want you all to have fun. So just be sure that you follow the rules. So observe local regulations. Be sure that you bring buckets and supplies. My number one favorite tool for hunting shark teeth are actually those little pill bags that you get in a pharmacy, the little wee bags, not even the size of the palm of your hand. Those things are great because they are perfect for putting in small specimens and transporting them quickly. Also, too, just on a note, try not to go hunting when it's been a drought for a while because there won't be as much water washing things through. But do go a couple days after you've had a very large rain. So the rain is washed through and you've got some fresh material. Just don't go during a large rain because you may have flooding conditions. Definitely wear waders or water shoes. I wear my old water shoes from when I had season passes at Wildwater Kingdom, and they still work great. And keep in mind where you park and where you locate your vehicle and other things. Be sure it's close to where you're collecting, because some of these areas, the parking isn't always very accessible from where you go collecting. Now, that is the sieve that I use. It's also too the actual, like that little the container that I put it in, because what I do is like my husband will scoop in some of the material and then I'll sieve it over the top because I'm a bit more careful than he is, and I'm used to more so spotting these things easier. So that way, if you sieve it over something like that, which I actually believe that's a cat litter pan, then if you say that something happens and you miss something that's small, then it's still in the bottom of the litter pan. You don't really still miss it. So basically, you can go through your sieve, go through what you see, and then take a little, like a once over of what's in your cat litter pan before you put it back in the water. You may also find a variety of other things, like on the left you have belemnites. You can also have various trace fossils, like say burrows, what other things that are filled in. And of course, you may have shells, namely one of my favorites of all time, well, the favorite shell of all time, Exogyra. Now, these teeth right here. So, for those playing around at home, which of these do you think is the fossil? Now, no cheating, no looking it up. Which do you think is the fossil? And which do you think is what? Well, first of all, the one at the top is a crocodile, which means that the one at the bottom is the fossil. So, what is it? It's a Mosasaurus. And both of these are very commonly mistaken for shark teeth. Now, mosasaurs, you actually can find teeth in the Northeast, and I have found mosasaur teeth in the Northeast. So, just something to keep in mind. You can also familiarize yourself locally with any specimens of bony fishes, rays, reptiles. I've even found hadrosaur teeth in the water, skates, or like that camel tooth that was driving me crazy for years, even mammal teeth. Now, some bony fishes that are in the Northeast, Encodus, Hadrodus, and the pycnodontid teeth, which they're very hard to describe. I can only describe them as kind of hollowed out canoes that are very, very small, and they often have a somewhat flared end to them with a little divot in them. Now, there are different species of what are called mackerel shark. The Archaeolomna are on the left, and the Cretolama is the smallish one that's kind of separated on the right. The crown is narrower and you have more concave edges. They're mostly from the Cretaceous, with the last one going into the Eocene as well. Now, the genus Carcharias is a mackerel, sand tiger shark. It's a bunch of other different genus, bunch of different species. Now, they're from the Cretaceous onwards. Now, this is actually known as the Godzilla shark, which is awesome. Dracopriestis hoffmanorum. Now, this is a Destus. This is one of my favorite sharks. So, the name means to devour, which is a reference to their tooth whorls. So, basically, if you look at the illustration on the right, it's almost like, and there's another species that we'll get into too that looks like this, kind of. They remind me a lot, almost, of the sandworms and Beetlejuice. So think of a head inside of a head. So you have that giant part of the skull, that bony part of the skull coming out, and then beneath that, the jaw actually juts out of the part of that skull and then curves upward. Now, this is Glycmanius. They were over 20 foot long, and when you consider the Carboniferous, that's actually pretty awesome sauce that they had something that long that early ago. Now, okay, so goblin sharks. There's a little bit of a debate going on with what species belong in goblin sharks, and really if the modern day goblin shark is Mythocorina. Now, whether or not these fossil species are what have linked to goblin sharks, whether or not they're actually related, and how related they are. But there's Scipanorhynchus is one, and then there's also another common species of air quote goblin shark in this general area, which is Anomotodon. Now, this is the one that I mentioned from earlier that kind of reminds me of Entodus. Helicoprion. Now, this one is from the Permian, and for the longest time, people couldn't figure out what the devil these things were. They were looking at the tooth whorls and just finding the tooth in general, and they were thinking, well, maybe it was something like a death assemblage, like a bunch of animals all died together at once somehow, or maybe it's some really weird, unique kind of fossil. It's just, no, the bottom part of their teeth basically almost fit kind of like on a pizza cutter segment of bone, and that's how their jaws go. And there it is right there. So that's literally the whorl of teeth that go within their jaw. Now, okay. Now, I've been doing this for a couple of years, and one of the weirdest things that I ever had happen was when I did a solo video on the megalodon, because oh my god, that brought some of the crazies out of the woodwork. So I did this. Obviously, it's small print and you don't have to read it, but you can pause it and read it later. Nonetheless, I dedicated that to this guy that just lost his mind on me, insisting that megalodon were in fact extinct. Not extinct, rather. I'm sorry. First of all, that is a megalodon tooth to the left. To the right is our friend, the great white. Megalodon is extinct. They've been extinct for quite a long time. They lived from about 23 to 3.6 million years ago. Back in the years, they were actually once thought to be an ancestor of the great white, but yeah, those genetic paths diverged about 65 million years ago. So, sorry, that ship sailed a long time ago. Now, Meg, as they're called, Meg teeth, have long had a fascination with people and were even used in patent medicine. People would grind up the teeth and thinking that they had certain powers and like imbibe these teeth, trying to like get well or better or other characteristics. There was even amongst one of the possessions that was insured when it was brought on board the Titanic. This lady brought on board this very precious to her megalodon shark tooth necklace. Now, and again, they really are extinct. And I actually did not know that they had this until I was looking for photos for this, so gosh darn it, I missed National Megalodon Day. At least, though, you know now, and we have plenty of time to start shopping. So, Tychodus is from the Cretaceous. It's a genus with several different species. As you can tell, they're all just a scooch bigger than humankind. Now, Squalocorax is very common in the Northeast. They're wonderfully easy to find. I love them. They're colloquially known as crow sharks. They're from the Cretaceous. Now, this handsome fellow is an anvil shark. They're kind of known popularly, Stephacanthus. From the Devonian to the Carboniferous, the name means chest spine, so you have that anvil-shaped dorsal fin, and then also to the lower spine that's kind of sort of like directly below where the dorsal fin is in the illustration. Now, Xenocanthida is an order of shark-like fish. Note the quotes. Some people classify them as sharks, some do not. And they include a couple of different species that are often pop up in various like old shark websites and things like that you may see, like TikToks and things. Now, so thank you very much for joining us today. And just again, a reminder, sharks have been around for a very, very long time. They're really, they are indeed marvels of engineering. So thank you much. And go out there, farewell and adieu, and enjoy some sharks.